Did you know that we only have astronomy because astrology existed? Take a second to think about that. Before we understood what the stars were, like as flaming balls of gas and whatever, don't light your dress on fire. Before we understood what the stars were as flaming balls of gas, we knew that there was something incredible happening in the stars above us. Before we had these rational ways of understanding science and technology, we would sit around campfires and we would notice the patterns of the stars above us. And as they moved and danced, we saw our own journeys being reflected by this incredible movement across this expanse of chaos. We told stories about the shapes in the constellations, and then we related them back to the people in our lives. And from there, it grew and grew and grew. In ancient Greece, astrologers were very significant in the social systems of how everything was placed. You know, in medieval times in Europe, they were used as advisors to royalty, and there would be timing that everything would be done by. This was also done in Russia, you know, and in even like a less sort of like Western tradition, like we can see in indigenous cultures like the Mayan culture, where it's all based on the movement of the stars, how they were predicting the cycles of life. And so when you think about the ancient past, it makes sense that we would look at this thing above us that was so grand and magnificent, right? Like, I hope that you've had the feeling of sitting and looking at the stars and just being in complete awe, because there are very few feelings like it. And it is when you come in interaction with the divine. And so they would measure these patterns that they were seeing in the seasons, the cycles with these balls of light, and they would use that to make sense of a seemingly unsensible world, right? We would make sacrifices and do all of these sorts of rituals to appease this force that's greater than us. And then, as science and technology have developed, we've gained this deeper understanding that the power of divinity is this power of choice, and that we and our actions are able to tap into this idea of the divine, right? That's how we get into like manifestation and law of attraction and all that sort of stuff. But it's also the science, right? We look at the people who are born in the middle of the winter, like Aquarius is, who are born in the dead of winter, right? When the resources are at their most scarce, when people are having to stay inside. And what are Aquarius's determining characteristics? That they're very individualistic while they also care a lot about the collective. So think about that from a survival standpoint of a baby. The baby, as a biological being, knows like, I need to stay alive. There's not a lot of resources. It's really cold. There's like an extra layer of difficulty here. And also, I need to protect my people because we're staying inside together. We're very close together. And so we can see how scientifically these psychological patterns of life being influenced by our external environment create the conditions for us to manifest in these certain cyclical patterns. This idea of archetypes, okay? So an archetype is a universally inherited system, idea, or thought pattern that exists throughout humanity. Right? So think about the concept of the mother as an archetype. It doesn't matter where you are in the world or what kind of mom you have, you know the mom, the mother, the father, the teacher, the student, the child, the sibling, right? There's all of these sort of interdynamic roles, and then we also have the roles that we take on as individuals, right? The philosopher, the traveler, the healer, right? So these roles and characters that we play are one way of looking at our subconscious and also the way that we're showing up in the world. And so the way that that goes back into astrology is that each of the 12 zodiac signs represent a certain archetype of energy. right? Aries being the beginning of the zodiac. They're the first one. They're the initiatory step at the beginning of spring. They represent the child. They have incredibly youthful, vital energy. They're very curious people. And also, babies have to learn by putting their hand on the hot thing sometime and learning that it hurts. Just the same way that Aries have to like go for the thing and then get shut down and learn that that's not the way that something works. So when we're looking at how does astrology apply to our everyday life, we have to remember that we have all 12 of these signs within us. We have these 12 predominant archetypes that show up in all of humanity, and that we are made up of all of these different bits and pieces that the whole collective all experiences. So when you're looking at your own chart, you're looking at what is the mixture of known and unknown energy that I am working with as a conscious being on this planet in this paradigm. And so there's a lot of different ways that this technique of looking at astrology can really, really impact your life and help you just grow into the highest version of yourself. And so in this video, we're going to be talking about the 5 best and worst ways to use astrology in your everyday life. So stick around for the last one because it is juicy. Let's just dive right into the worst way to use astrology in your everyday life. And for this example, I am going to use a story. So say that you are going to lunch with like a longtime friend that you've had, okay? And this longtime friend is into astrology, and they read about it and they kind of obsess about it. So it's definitely something that they talk about all the time. And you have been like trying to interact with them and you guys have been having some personal issues, right? Like let's say you guys have been having a communication breakdown and you're trying to like address your boundaries. Well, you bring this up to this person at lunch. You're like, hey man, like I really would appreciate it if you did blah, 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 blah. And they're like, I totally hear you. I really do. However, like I'm just a Scorpio, so I'm just a little bit obsessive, right? I'm just like a little bit in your face. Like there's nothing I can do about it. I'm just a Scorpio. Like, ugh. That is the worst way to use astrology because what you're doing is you're spiritual bypassing, all right? Which spiritual bypassing is when you use like a spiritual concept like meditation or mysticism or astrology or religion or God or whatever you want to use. And then you say that like this thing that you as a human being are doing that's hurting another person, that it's fine because of this spiritual reason. And that's just not how spirituality works. Spirituality is like a path of attunement to the highest version of yourself in many different forms, in many different ways. So when the universe presents you an opportunity to look at a reflection of like your darkness, then that's one of those moments where you have to like take that in stride and then say, oh, okay, I'm sorry that I was doing that. I have this tendency inside of me to be very obsessive. Like I am a Scorpio, and that is in my chart. However, like I see how that's hurting you, and so I'm wondering how I can use this obsessive energy that I have inside of me to channel it into something better or more healthy or happy or whatever. So that's kind of the first way, right? Where it's like, don't use astrology as a means to bypass your shitty behavior to your homies or to the world in general. Also, when people blame things on Mercury in retrograde, but it was definitely just an oversight that they don't want to take responsibility for. I think that's one of the reasons why astrology gets a lot of heat, is because people will just like blame things on astrology when they don't want to take accountability for it themselves. So that's where we're gonna start. One of my favorite things about astrology is sort of the inverse of that point that I just made. So when you're able to look at the shadows that you have present in your life, the difficulties, the challenges, the obstacles that you face, the maybe like negative traits that you possess, you're able to then gain such a profound level of self-awareness that it makes it so that you can continuously work with this energy that you have within you from a place of understanding, right? Because if you So Capricorns are workaholics, right? Like they are people who are very, very ambitious. They're very driven. They're very organized. They're like CEO energy. But the shadow of that is that sometimes they can neglect themselves, or they can be really stubborn, or really, really narrow focused and detached from their community because they're so focused on building this thing. So if you know in your chart that you have a bunch of Capricorn placements and that it shows up in the 5th house, that means that you know that you have a tendency to maybe detach or be too strict with yourself, too hardcore in the area of your creativity. And even like the 5th house rules your children. So like with your kids. And so then when you have this conscious awareness of like, oh, like one of my inherited patterns that I came into this world as a spirit to work with was this energy of being strict, that means that you can then like experiment and explore and expand what that means instead of just living in this unconscious pattern that created that condition. Because ultimately our birth charts are maps of the things that we came to this earth to learn. And this is sort of tapping into some of the work of Dolores Cannon and other really, really significant thought leaders. So I definitely recommend checking out her work on the 3 waves of volunteers and things like that, because she talks a lot about how Earth itself is a school and how we as spirits incarnate here on this plane to be able to learn different things, right? Like when we're spirits, we can't hug each other. We can't build a house or harvest food from the land or have to deal with robots, you know, like that is just a very Earth thing. And so coming to this plane, we all come here with certain lessons that we want to learn, certain patterns. And you can see what these lessons are the more that you pay attention to your family, your environment, your habits, the experience that you've had. And so astrology is kind of like a magnifying glass to this, because it says, all right, well, here's what you're transmuting. Here's like the dark things of your past and also the great accomplishments of your spirit. And here's how you can, you know, continue to rise and continue to level up. I think that even built into some of the archetypal zodiac signs, this idea of alchemy, of transforming from a darker thing into this being of light is very present. Capricorn, like I said, is the sea goat, which their legend is that they start at the bottom of the ocean and then throughout their journey they ascend to the top of the mountain. As you can imagine, it would be very difficult to swim from the bottom of the ocean and then learn how to climb a mountain. You spend your entire life deeply submerged in your emotions, the water, the depth, right? Capricorns tend to have a really, really difficult first period of their life because they have this inner stoicism, this strength. And in order to have that strength, it has to get built up in some kind of way. So that's generally how it happens, is through difficulty and pressure. And then right around, Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, and so when Saturn returns right around 28, like to the early 30s, when you have your Saturn return, which is something that we could talk a whole video about, is then you start to ascend up the top of the mountain. You start to gain perspective and clarity and get out of this emotional depth that you've been sort of drowning in throughout your life to gain and make significant changes. And that's why Capricorns end up being so successful in business and other ventures, is because they take the time to deeply learn and to continue this climb and continue this ascension up this metaphorical mountain. Another good example of this is Scorpios. So the animal that represents Scorpio is obviously a scorpion, but one of the more obscure myths about Scorpio is that after, I don't remember the catalyst that turns it to transform, but eventually a scorpion, as it transforms its darkness, it unfurls into this phoenix eagle, and then it soars, right? So, which is so interesting. Some of these legends are just who thought of this, you know? And why is it stuck around for so long, and why does it actually make sense? If you've met a Scorpio, they probably did start off as a scorpion. They probably did have to protect themselves a lot, were very secretive, kind of hard to find and identify, and had their own agendas, and maybe dealt with some obsession and things like that. And then throughout their life, a really healed Scorpio, somebody who's really gone on this journey of self-development, they are the most intuitively keen people, right? Talk about a bird's eye view. A Scorpio has this uncanny ability to like just look at things from this higher perspective and then hone in on this one area that would allow for all of these other things to flow with more ease. The same way that like a predator bird hunts. So that's one of the really great things about astrology, is that it helps you grow. It helps you transcend your limitations and evolve into something new. And that's built into the story, right? We aren't meant to stay the same. We're meant to grow and change and shift and evolve, just as the planets and stars are always moving. All right, point number 2. Let's talk about timing. So transits are the planets as they are currently in motion. Right? So your natal chart or your horoscope is a fixed snapshot of the universe at a certain date and time and location. The transits of the planets are the way that they're currently moving around and the way that they relate to that fixed spot in time, or just society as a whole, right? Like, I'm not looking at a birth chart right now, but I'm still being affected by the planets. And so the shadow aspect of timing in using astrology to connect with your everyday life is that that blaming thing where we're like, Mercury's in retrograde, like it just won't work, where that's not necessarily what like Mercury in retrograde really means, because a retrograde represents a planet going backwards in the sky. So there's this energy of the past sort of resurging. And so when we look at transits and we fear them, that is definitely like a really, really sticky territory. And this comes with a lot of predictive astrology too, where people are looking at, oh, like Uranus and Mars are conjunct, and so there's going to be like some kind of unexpected violence that happens. Now, is this partially accurate? Absolutely. Uranus and Mars were conjunct in Aries, the sign of the warrior, in Aquarius energy, the sign of rebellion and revolution, on the day that there was a very significant recent American political event. So astrology is definitely predicting things that are happening on a large scale. And that's totally real. But living in fear of transits that could be sticky is not the point of understanding a transit. Rather, you can look at this chaotic energy that's blending in the universe and say, okay, how can I work with this to maintain like the best outcome for me, right? How can I use this chaotic energy of transformation, of death and rebirth, whatever it is that your current favorite internet astrologer is bringing up to you, and apply it in a way that empowers me, right? It's the difference between like fear mongering and empowering. So if you're watching an astrologer and they're like, the universe is a cruel bitch and this week is just going to be so hard, like that person isn't really tapping into your highest timeline or giving you helpful advice. Instead, the helpful way that an astrologer can present information is saying, there are some very, very chaotic energies happening right now. Make sure that you take extra precautions when you're driving, be mindful, like plan ahead, but it's not like fear mongering. And so that's one of the ways that I think that modern astrology kind of doesn't always do people the biggest service, because there are some people who are just going to use it as an opportunity to like feed into anxiety, where the real like glowing benefit, the best way to use astrology, reason number 2, is for the timing, right? You can look at these transits and you can see when it's auspicious for you to start a business, for you to have a wedding. That's very, very traditional. People have been using astrology to determine the date of their marriage for a long time. And the way that you do that is you come together as a couple and you think about like, what are all of the things that we want to stand for? What are the things that we want to have as a core part of our relationship? And then you bring these to the astrologer, and then the astrologer plots out the date and time. And you probably have a location set, but like if you're really open to it, a location that matches that makeup that you want to anchor your relationship into. Or you can also look at kind of more predictively, like if this day has harmonious energies or unharmonious energies or lots of squares or something like that. And so being able to choose things a specific date and time, when to do something. And some of the readings that I've given recently, I've been reading for a lot of people with their own businesses. And so I've been looking at where Mars and Jupiter and Mercury are specifically, because I'm like, okay, if you were to align your actions that you're taking right now with Mars and say it's in, I don't know, like Gemini, so then your actions would align with communicating with your network of people. And then Jupiter, which is the planet of good luck and expansion, is like connected to that, and it is in Libra, which means that like right now is going to be a lot about creating balance and justice. So the more that you can act very fairly, act very balanced, then like your business is going to expand a lot right now, because now you're aligning it with 2 of the planetary transits that are going on in your life. And then if you add Mercury in, because it's the planet of travelers and commerce and business and merchants, then you say, okay, well, Mercury is in Sagittarius, so that means that the way that I need to communicate maybe needs to be a little bit more philosophical than usual, right? Like my audience is going to respond really well to this more fun, upbeat energy, or even pulling in some different cultural aspects and things like that. And so when we look at transits from this perspective of how can I work with the energies that are happening right now, we really hone in on what is the most aligned action I could take in order to get a certain result that is already like bubbling up inside of my consciousness. That's one of the great things about astrology, is that it's not here to write your destiny, it's here to show you what you're tapping into, right? So like all of the ideas that you have about who you are, what you're supposed to be doing, that inner knowing, intuition sort of things are going to be reflected in the stars, because that's you walking your destined path. Astrology is just there to help you reflect and say, in what areas can I really step into this, and how do I align myself with that in some pretty specific ways? Let's talk about love, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about astrological compatibility. Okay, number 3, love and romance. Now, this is a very, very tricky one, because there's just a lot here. This is one of the primary reasons why people around the world do use astrology, is to understand the compatibility, the energy flow between lovers, you know, or even business partners, or just your boo or whatever, you know. So I'm going to start with the shadow, and to me that is reading somebody's chart that you just met at the beginning of like the flirtation stage is such a no-go. Like, don't do that. I'm speaking from experience here as a professional astrologer and as a hopeless romantic who knows a lot about astrology and would immediately be like, let me look at the chart, you know? And from that place, what I've learned is that by trying to come to an understanding of who this person is without actually giving the time and space and interactions for that to naturally unfold, you create this vision and projection and dream of them that is not who they actually are, and it becomes this point of like in every relationship where you have to then like ground back into who this person actually is without these like projections and desires of what it is that you want them to be. So that's like my word to the wise, you know, like give it 6 months, 8 months, a considerable period of time of like talking to this person before you try and figure out like their Venus sign and their Mars and all this stuff, because yeah, it's like good to have ideas about who this person is, but if you're doing it from this lens of like, how can I make this work? You're already like giving so much of your power away to this relationship instead of coming into it from a place of wholeness, because you're saying like, oh, if I morph myself into this energy, then it will be well received by this person's perceived energy, when really what the goal of union is, and the way that we get to our most juicy, deep, desireful chemistry, spicy relationships, is by coming into them like fully embodied, loving all of that we are, our light, our dark, and finding somebody else who like actually is compatible with that, not somebody else who we can like grow to mirror in this certain way. I think that's like a pretty like wounded feminine energy that exists inside of the collective, is like trying to morph ourselves into a certain being to be loved and to receive love from this one archetype or this one person that we want so badly in our life, without understanding that like what we want is what we perceive that they're able to give us, that actually we need to be able to find inside of ourselves. And that's not to say that like, you know, like you have to be totally healed in order to be in a relationship. It's just saying like, don't change yourself for the sake of another person's desire, because you don't actually know if that's what they want or who they are or how it manifests for them. And so when you look at an astrology chart at the beginning of a relationship, you are setting yourself up for a vision distortion. And just listen from me and don't do it. Okay, so the best way to use astrology in love and relationships, though, because this is one of my favorite types of readings to do, this is one of my favorite things about astrology, is that it does help us come to a deeper understanding of people, is with your friends and also with your lovers and your business partners and whoever. After you've known them for a period of time, you've like interacted, you've hung out, you've had some experiences about who this person is and all that sort of stuff, then is a great time to look at your charts together, because then you can say like, oh, I am an Aquarius Venus, which means that I receive love very intellectually, and I love to be stimulated, and I love to try new things, and I always want to go out and really just like push the boundaries of the known and unknown. And then that person like knows this about you now, you know, and then it's a little like a gateway into a conversation about your desires, right? Because it's a conversational guide, right? When you're looking at a chart, because then you go from like, well, this is what I really love. This is what my emotions need, and that I have a hard time communicating with the moon sign. This is how I communicate with like the Mercury. Venus, how I receive. Mars, how I give, right? And so it allows you to go into like this really, really deep, intimate conversation of like needs and desires and boundaries and give and take, and how you work well together, and also some areas where you maybe will just naturally have some tension or aren't very compatible, or like it's not really your style or something like that. And from that place, instead of like you trying to determine how to act, you already have a natural relationship and flow with this person, and then you guys get to grow in your deepening of understanding of like how to work best as a team. A lot of the really potent things that an astrology chart reading for synastry, which is the word that's used for two charts like read in a couple, is you know, like, what do you guys stand for as a couple? What are you guys healing in each other? What are you guys brought together to learn? What is your soul contract between one another, and what's the nature of that? I also think that just in general, anything that has to try and set something in stone is probably a sticky slope. Like, you want to be open to change, into evolution, into ebbing and flowing, and trying to fix something based off of this perceived notion of destiny and prophecy is like, I don't know, it's so, you know, 1496. Like, we don't need to do it that way anymore. So definitely look at love and relationships. Definitely look at your compatibility. It's super great with groups of people to understand like what we all bring to the table, but don't use it as a template of who you think that you need to become in order to earn this person's love. Instead, look at your own chart, study it, and become the best lover. Come into the deepest union that you can with you and yourself. Let's talk magic. So, the fourth and final best and worst way to use astrology in your everyday life is called embodied astrology. Really, this is not the worst way to use astrology. I don't have like any bad things to say about this process. I think that this is one of the most juicy, potent ways to connect with the divine and to connect with something that is greater than us, and to really see ourselves as very, very powerful, because ultimately that's one of the most beautiful things about astrology, is that it taps you directly into your power. It shines a light on your uniqueness and says, this is the thing that makes you so fucking special. Lean into it, explore that, keep going, you know? And so embodied astrology is the art of looking at your natal chart, of looking at the transits that are happening in the world, and then infusing them into your everyday life. So for example, later today, after I'm done filming this video, I'm teaching a class in my Goddess Initiation program where I help women ascend into their power, tap into their magic, expand their consciousness, all that good stuff. And I'm teaching a unit on Aries. So today I dressed fully in my Aries energy, very powerful, very spicy, not very demure, you know? And so that's one way that you can do it. You can use different elements of the signs and planets to really express yourself. Also, if you're wanting to up your magnetism, you can dress like your Venus sign. If you're wanting to be perceived as more powerful, you dress like your Mars sign. If you want to, you know, create new opportunities and really end some cycles in your life, you explore working with Pluto and what that looks like. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do these practices. So I'm going to give you a couple of different examples so that you can explore it for yourself. So I already touched on this first idea of dressing like a certain sign. So this really helps when you are maybe just like, I don't know, you're feeling uninspired, you're feeling unconnected, and things are just maybe like getting a little repetitive and you're wanting more, right? You know that there's more out there for you, but you've been stuck in the mundane world. Like you're going to your job, you're going home, you're doing the same thing all the time. Well, one of the easiest ways to spice your day up is what you adorn your body with. And maybe you're in a job that doesn't allow you to, you know, casually wear a corset and a silk dress. I hear you. I used to be that way too. I used to work in an office before I fully committed to living my magical path. That is how I got here. And so, but you can, you know, like add different elements into your makeup if you wear makeup, or add different elements into your jewelry. All of the jewelry that I'm wearing today is Aries energy, right? Because I wanted to bring out this like fire starter in me. And so you can style your hair in a way that reflects certain energies. Or if you're more masculine and you're less into this sort of like outwardly style thing, it can also be about like the smells that you use, right? So like frankincense is very, I keep talking about Capricorn, whichever Capricorn is watching this, I see you. But like Capricorn is very well associated with like frankincense and with those deep, earthy, musky smells. And so if you're needing to have this sort of strength and organizational power, then you can put this smell on your body, and then that helps you tap into this energy of this thing that's like consciously much larger than you. And then you're having it aid you because you're bringing down this energy to work with inside of your own field of reality, which is very, very potent and very powerful. Another way that you can do embodied astrology is through movement. And so say that you are going through a lot in your love and relationships, and that is ruled by Libra. Libra is the planet that, Libra is ruled by Venus, the planet of love, and it also rules over the 7th house, the house of partnerships, of fated, destiny, soulmates, all of that kind of stuff. And so if you're having a hard time in your love life right now, turn on a song that has Libra energy, whether that's like looking it up on YouTube or on Spotify and finding a playlist that somebody else said, like, this is Libra energy, or, you know, remembering that Libra is very elegant, it's very loving, it's very, it's all about justice and balance and reciprocity. So like turning on a song that talks about the give and the take, that really represents like the emotions that you're feeling, and then maybe drawing the symbol on your body. I like to draw it on my heart or on like my stomach or on my feet if I'm dancing, and then allowing yourself to just kind of like almost like take a step back. Like it's allowing your consciousness to move from this like front of our brain and more relaxed and arriving into our bodies, and then just letting the music move you so that this energy can move through you. And by doing this sort of movement dance meditation, you come into a deeper understanding of what it is that you're going through on this like level, right? Because it's the difference of looking at a problem like this close or taking a step back and seeing the whole picture. And so that's the second way that you can do embodied astrology. The third way, I don't know. This look got me feeling spicy. I think I'm gonna spice it up for you guys. I'm gonna do something a little bit crazy, but I'm gonna tell you maybe one of my favorite ways to work with astrology, embodied astrology that is, and it is through sex magic. You heard that right, sex magic. So whether that is solo, like with yourself, or partnered, calling down the energy of a certain sign that you want to work with while you are in a spicy, sensual situation, allows you to deepen your understanding, deepen this activation. So all of the different signs represent a certain body part. It starts at Aries with the head, and then Taurus at the throat. Gemini is the hands, Leo is the shoulder and back, and Cancer is like the heart and the chest. And it goes all the way down, all the way to the feet, which are Pisces. And so you can really explore this certain body part and the energy of this body part, because that's how, you know, this larger cosmic consciousness is manifesting through you. This whole idea that, like, we are made up of a tiny billion cells, and we are a tiny billionth of a cell inside of a much larger living organism. And inside of a larger living organism, right? Like, the universe has a planet inside of it, has us on the planet with how it's like microbiomes inside of our body. So it's just this like Russian nesting doll of life that reflects itself. That's what the whole statement, like, as above, so below, represents. It means that, like, as on this grand level, it's happening within me too. So when we're looking at embodying astrology, right, if Gemini represents the hands, then as you're working with your life force energy, sexual energy, and you're working with your hands, you are deepening your understanding of these qualities of yourself. And Gemini is the sign, like, just because I used it as an example, it's the sign of, like, the innovative tinkerer. Like, they have this uncanny ability to understand the way through something by being able to use their mental acuity to perceive a situation and then translate that into their body to, like, move through something, right? And so if you're wanting to overcome an obstacle that's very brainy, working with Gemini energy is really helpful. If you're wanting to be more social, more networking, working with Gemini energy is super helpful. And so what does that look like inside of, like, a spicy working? Well, it looks like you call that energy in, you draw that sign on your body in, like, oil or something, or even just with your finger or with a marker or with whipped cream, whatever you do. I don't know, I'm not you. And then you go through and you have this internal journey of exploration of your desire, of your pleasure, of the things that get brought up for you. And then from there, oh, this is so funny. And then you specifically focus on your hands because they represent Gemini. And then that is like a gateway into this deeper unlocking of your own energy with that. And I know that it sounds a little bit lofty while I'm talking about it, but I promise, like, try it yourself and you will definitely have some results. And the way that this can work with a partner too is, it's like, say that this is kind of, a more interesting way. So obviously you could, like, really work on embodying, like, your Venus if you're the more, like, feminine partner, and then the masculine, like, is more in their, like, Mars energy, and, like, you guys really play up, like, that role, right? But you could also, if you're feeling like your relationship isn't super balanced, or, like, you're wanting to connect deeper with one another, then as you're going into this space of sacred union, like, you like, cleanse and clear and create the energy as you're, like, you know, beginning your melding, if you will. And then you talk about, like, the opposite person embodies the sign of the other person's moon sign. So say that your partner is a Cancer moon and that you are a Leo moon. So then, like, you are going to, like, draw down the energies of Cancer, because that allows you to really connect deeply with your partner's soul and with their spirit, because the moon represents our inner world, our emotions, things like that. And then your partner would you know, really work on drawing down the energies of Leo into their heart and into their soul, and then seeing what that does. You know, it changes the energy. And maybe you're a theatrical girly and you like to get like a little wild with it, right? And then it really shows up in what you're doing, and you're like taking it as this almost like role play moment. Or maybe you're like much more subtle and you just called in the energies and then go about having your union in the way that you usually would. But just knowing that those energies are present creates this extra layer to the alchemical fire that is your relationship. So I didn't know I was going to give you that spicy tip today, but there you go. Have fun. So now you can see how astrology relates to the collective consciousness, how it relates to your individual journey, how it helps you heal your shadows and become the best version of yourself, how it helps you have better sex, how it helps you do just so many things. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you are interested in more practical magic, want to know more about how to become the most radiant version of yourself, then I am the witch for you. Go ahead and like and subscribe and comment down below anything that you took away from this video or anything that you would like to know more about. I have lots in store for you, and I can't wait to see you soon.